Okay, yeah, I want to include some more information. I was thinking about the secrets of the temple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country, and the De Beers diamonds. Okay, German owned, predominantly mining raw diamonds out of the Sahara Desert area in the Africa area. In that area, predominantly the Sahara. The thing about Sahara and all the information, quite a bit, and all the practical application of the geographics in Book Secrets of the Temple, likewise, certain factors. But anyway, I was wanting to include something about Beers diamonds that way, because it seemed to almost be the thing about the diamonds in De Beers diamonds as compared to, there's like a scripture, Jesus knew you before the foundations of the earth, okay? There's some idea of the spore stone being used like a preliminary prejudice of product registration of a birth certificate in the way of the spore stone, because, I've had some time to think about, an experience going through, what at the time, this is really after the fact, before I actually realized that memory minus de facto being 35 had been, kind of like, like a factor, a big thing about memory. Obviously something, during I'm assuming a 6 to a 9 month period that, it seemed to be the thing about the air quality, air rate going through the circuit. And there was like a period of like 9 to 6 months that I couldn't really count for. And the thing with this is 25, 30 going on, depending on what point of origin, for that period, because it being aerated in gas, like while asleep, it seemed to be the deal about, I don't want to just like throw it off on Guia International, but in any case, so it seemed to be, it presented issues of like locations I was taken to, of like music video and motion picture of certain factors involved overseas in certain places around the United States, and it seemed like quite a bit was going on for a 6 to 9 month period that had not any type of rejuvenating factor of like memory involving television or certain factors of YouTube. I probably might not have, really realized. And, like, once again, real quick, it seemed to be a thing about the Europe's most wealthiest museum, and Microsoft presenting it as sequencing a certain group of screensavers. And the thing with this is that I'm not real sure if it's going to be the issue of like a the thing about having fair use is like a third party, or the idea of like a supplemental security being used like as a categorization, or the carbon footprint absentee, identifying maybe the thought of a supplemental security that is normally identified, as Austin, Texas, originating based upon, Social Security Administration, being introduced. My thing, it seemed to me that it goes beyond what a misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi would only mean to the international superstar, and the thing about the International Space Station, International like Secret Service, and the ratio like HTTP : / between the colon and the ratio, and the ISS and the SSI supplemental security, and superstar intelligence, and the thing about the Mississippi, and the thing about the biggest mouth of the river being, the Delta Force, and think about the triangle that way, and the pyramid on the backside of the US $1, and the power square factor to the 3-point triangle to being 6-point star, like an absolute Christianity thing of a code blue, and the Israeli flag, and all that stuff. But anyway, it's kind of like the book Secrets of the Temple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country, okay? And certain factors like memory became, really after the fact, realizing that de facto litigation, de facto and writ of habeas corpus. I'm not real sure about everything involved, but there was like before I really realized that we international had been involved in a way that maybe went beyond my thought of maybe what would have been automatically involving television programming. In any case, so it's like really on to the June 14th, 1992, a Flag Day baptism at the Mormon Church, okay? June 14th, 1992, okay? The thing with this is that the thing about the intellectual property, and it seemed to be the thing about the, the American religion being the Mormon and the American Amplified, and what having fair use. Normally, the idea of having fair use is like intellectual property. Normally, an easement, a claim of like owners of like rights, rights to the ownership, not necessarily a breach of like copyright or infringement based upon the thing about the whether or not if writs of habeas corpus is the only thought of like suggesting participation of television programming, or that don't be fooled by imitations, but the thing about having fair use as compared to the thought of like practice makes perfect is beyond the hype. The thing about writs of habeas corpus, the definition, placing, produce the evidence. Many people might not see that as some idea of like a boycott and embargo, or some idea of no, I don't. Litigation doesn't normally always identify de facto as settlement based upon a writ of habeas corpus, and sometimes it's like the who knows anyway form of television programming, whether or not if a writ of habeas corpus is used as a deed restriction or appreciation or depreciation, and it only seems to be of neighborhoods of residential that way, that define two of the three aggregates being monetary and domestic that way, and it seems that the monetary more specifically itemizes as maybe a specific, more so itemized beyond categorization, okay, and what that is in the way of like what action is. But anyway, I was thinking about the thing about the writs of habeas corpus, because like between Wyatt Earp and John Wayne and the True Grit thing, and Wyatt Earp, it seemed to be the thing really as a projected as an option in the future, projecting some idea of like the conversion of analog to digital. I mean, all the way back then, before the thought of like color television had predominantly not even been the thought of like digital anything, but the transition from black and white, but not really the whole entire complete transition from analog to digital. And it seemed somewhere in between like the solid state and bandwidth and spectrum seemed to be some idea of like a distinguishing difference between like frequency or waveform or power amplification, involving the megahertz and kilohertz. What is showing now on the home theater is a 192, which 192 is like a re-entering heaven. The one word in Thessalonians is transfiguration, and it's like 192, or telepathic drummer, or telepathic pentagon, and the alphanumerics of even a telepathic ambassador. The thing with this is that 192 presents, combined with a new accomplishment on the backside of the U.S. $1 bill, transfiguration, ultimately gets to, equaling 12, the numerical value. Yet the word 12 spelled out is like 87, and kind of like a miracle God, an FBI God is like 78. Okay, the thing with it is the exact opposite of 87 is 78, like escrow. And the thing with it is that like a heart God and escrow, it presents like an FBI miracle that's like 17, and 61 is like 78. Yet the new accomplice is an alphanumeric value minus 192. The word transfiguration is all about Mount Olives and re-entering heaven from a plateau, and the similarities are like Moses, getting the 10 Commandments that way on 2 tablets, presenting, the alphanumerics of 71 in Pearland, likewise the plateau, and the thing about the international electronic engineering, the 10 Commandments being etched, by lightning, and the thing about the golden calf, the thing about the Tower of Babel, and Moses come back and like there was like the thing going on about the golden calf, and then like everyone like started speaking like different languages, okay. And the thing with this is that it's almost like the thing about the Statue of Liberty in the way between the World Bank and the idea of like an easement being used, such as like Vice President Network as immigration custom enforcement of importing and exporting, and what that is with language as compared to international banking systems that way, and the color of money and the categorization of money as compared to like identifying, a normal daily standard transaction at the bank as a method of banking, normally involving, the thing about endorsement in a checking account. What is normally earned, not necessarily, based upon, the thought of employment, not necessarily, the constitutional law having a right to assemble and the freedom of press and the freedom of speech, some idea of having fair use, not breaching copyright based upon, don't be fooled by imitations. Not breaching copyright would almost be, just like knowing what the information is, and the freedom of the press. I mean, not a breach of copyright, yet not an infringement, not like an FDIC claim as a breach of like a U.S. patent, yet a patent pending, suggesting loss prevention would only be the thought of like, the U.S. dollar having the note as legal tender for all like debt, both public and private. And, that normally an endorsement doesn't identify anything. It's like a carbon footprint or absentee voting in international banking systems as an easement of intellectual property of international law having fair use. It's normally not even identified. Or writ of habeas corpus suggesting that producing the evidence would only be the thought of like, how comptrolling is some idea of like regulating factors of like how citing annotation is the only thought of whether or not if a writ of habeas corpus is some idea of like a post-production or editing or some option of like auditing, when in fact, auditing isn't necessarily the thought of maybe, any editing at all. And it seemed to be almost like the NFL instant replay of like EA Sports combined with like YouTube presents maybe the issue of like the misappropriation allocation that way at the Mississippi. And the ratio between HTTP colon double slash and a colon being like a ratio between, the ISS and the SSI, the Mississippi. Well, anyway, the book, Secrets of the Temple, presents all this information about, De Beers diamonds, okay? The reason why I'm bringing it up is because of a biblical scripture that Jesus knew for the foundation of the earth. And I'll get to the spore stone, but it's related as like a deep star 6 in the depths of the ocean, the spore stone, and what that is to like a birth certificate and the humerus bone. And the approximate length of most humerus bones, I guess, of newborn children at the time of birth, that their footprints are put on the birth certificate is approximately, I think, right around 4 inches. And it seems to be the thing about accurate, like now, this is the year 2025. 2025, I was like born 1964, okay. And like an experience of like, something about the humerus bone and like, I'm assuming, probably around 4 inches. I didn't even know I'd been operated on. There was like an air raid and being gassed in like an air raid while I was asleep. And there's like a 6 to 9 month period that I really almost, it's like an incoherent like experience, like whether if the vague, almost, I wouldn't really call it blind, but I mean the incoherence is like far beyond, what is described in driver's education on campus of like high school at the time. And it seemed to be the only thing about the cartoon that produces the eyes with the plus signs that represents the incoherence. It seems to be the only real way to explain some idea like the 1- sign or the minus basin. It seemed to be the only thing about the 1951 copyright of the Universal Magic Encyclopedia that even suggests alphanumerics as a square root to the -3. A minus sign, like the one pronoun of the 4 types of pronouns that cannot be used as a subject. It's almost like the American Idol of maritime law. And the whole point of making a grade beyond internet protocol of a local area network. And ultimately it gets to the wide area network and some idea of like Lincoln Continental, the word continental, presenting the thought of like, regions as well as, international banking system, international financial management of a rectangle that's like, Vantage Love 30 on the tennis court. And some idea of like combine of litigation somewhere between like Wyatt Earp and John Wayne. It's like litigation de facto, and it's almost like, Hopsing in like, Pepe is like the Mercedes between, the Pentagon and the Octagon, almost the difference between day and night, and what Pepe is to Mexico as compared to Hopsing being Japanese and like 71 in Pearland. And the thing about there's a SID number going through Harris, okay? And the thing about the Sydney, Australia seems to be the deal about the a 90 degree of an equator, some absolute longitude as compared to the thought of Lee Iacocca and Christopher Columbus at the deal about Plymouth Rock, and the big mouth of the river representing the triangle, and the delta schematically, and a power square of a 6-point star. And the thing that I was wanting to say about the spore stone being like the deep star 6 compared to the Israeli flag being a 6-point star, it presents the difference between the day and light. That seems to be the issue of like Univision presenting the 3 pastels in the black in the beginning and the 3 pastels in the white towards the end of like a rainbow black dot drumhead and an aquarium power white dot. And it seems to be thinking about Highway 59 being 140 in Pearland, Texas, and that specific location on West Loop 610, and Univision right there at Highway 59 on the outer northwest side, and catty corner, to be like the exact opposite of a double forward slash, and the Houston Post. And the thing about the Houston Post is like it's almost like after the fact, not necessarily anything other than possibly post-production as an option of editing as compared to like auditing legal media and deposition. Legal media presents the television as normally the live thing. Deposition normally presents the thought of like not really an archive yet, doesn't really have to be history or archive. Possibly a landmark that stands as like a current, thing about the, difference between a memorial as compared to a monument, and the isometrics of, participating factors giving the impression that isometrics is the anticipation of actual participation, and as a known fact with some idea of like isometrics that way. But the thing of it is that the book 6 of the Temple House Photo Server runs the country. It presents the De Beers diamonds, okay? And the thing about G said he knew before the foundations of the earth, and the spore stone that way, the deep star 6, yet it presents also the occupational safety and health combined with the N. And you've probably heard it before about and Clyde say nya nya nya, and later on in the song the lyrics says and so there he saw Fatima laying on a zebra skin rug with a ring on her finger and a bell on her toes and a bow on her nose. And the thing with this is that Clyde is presented as a camel, normally at the desert bend. The thing about the pronunciation and spelling and like 71 in Pearland as compared to desert. And the thing about the Mormon Church in Friendswood, it presents Sunset Boulevard. And the thing about desert and dessert, I've seen it spelled all 3 ways at that one location, the Mormon Church in Friendswood. It's almost like the Z71 of Galveston County in Pearland, and it presents those 3 in that way, like deseret and proper English grammatical composition. When the P's visible in silence, kind of like instead of deseret, it's like desert. Yeah. And dessert. And the thing of it is that it being spelled with 2 S's as compared to 1, or if the P's like visible or not based upon proper English grammatical composition. Think about the P, visible and pronounced, visible and silent. I've seen it spelled all 3 different ways. But the thing of it is that it seems it presents the thing of the 3, and it seems to be whether or not if litigation de facto and res habeas corpus is the only thought and idea that the Mormons, the American religion, has fair use of the King James Version Bible. It seemed to be the big deal of third person or easement of what would produce the idea of like royalties, the similarities of like annuity, not always a thought or perceived as the 1040 EZ presenting non-taxable income as prepaid tax. And the thing with this is that normally when a refund on a 1040 is involved, it's almost like a prepaid tax of non-taxable income based upon getting it back. The reimbursement actually is almost the similarity, yet a different function, but it accomplishes at a specific time. But what de facto does between litigation, okay, and writs of habeas corpus, producing the evidence. The thing of it is that that is the same principle of the 1040, that way of a 1040 EZ that has like a prepaid tax, yet non-taxable of like supplemental security as compared to employment of low income, yet a certain amount is taxable, and if it go beyond a certain point, like all of it gets refunded or a percentage, and it's still the same principle of the percentile of a continental level of like the thought of like the ratio of HTTP colon being a ratio double / the misappropriation allocation to the Mississippi and ISS and SSI that way, and other factors going on with that. But it presents all that practical application of principle of integration and practical application of compatibility, more so of programming between the word relation, between like the architecture and platform, and the deal about McDonald's Golden Arches presenting the factor of like both half cycles above the measuring cycles per second oscillation as both half cycles above, like McDonald's Golden Arches presents what would normally be a half above and a half below of one cycle of frequency per second in oscillation. It presents the equality of side by side in a different perspective of like visual, yet it presents the electronic schematic vision, the symbolic Christian symbolic representation of the electronic schematic fish, and the misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi. Well, anyway, so like it gets to the thing about the Beers Diamond and the book Secrets of the Temple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country, and ultimately Chevrolet Geoprism. And the thing about De Beers Diamonds, it presents the pearl bear, okay, and the pearl and the S in the 19, and Kobe ID 19, and the alphanumerics of like 72, in that way. And the thing about the Beers Diamond being a European-owned, a German-owned raw diamond mining in the Sahara Desert area, the Persian Gulf area of Africa, okay? They were like mining raw diamonds. Yet the information also in the Secrets of the Temple from like, Europe to like Africa, it presents all the information getting to the United States, and like a huge triangle that way of like the alphanumerics of the pastel being, like Egypt and like Harris and, Israeli, and the Mediterranean that way of Club Med, yet it presents Israel that way, yet it presents Europe, likewise the deal about the Mediterranean and Club Med, and the triangle that way. Likewise, the book Turbulent Waters presents, the thing about the 3 nuclear-powered ships and 3 nuclear-powered aircraft somewhere in between, the thing about the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean, and it presents the triangle, likewise, of the United States in the same category, and the book Secrets of the Temple likewise does, and the alphanumerics of like Harris and Egypt and Israeli, it presents the triangle. It's like the 3 triangles, and yet it's like the 3 intersecting axes of like Lockheed Martin being a 3-point intersecting axis, and Audi having, the 4 circles and the 3 intersecting axes. and now it's kind of like the telepathic blueprint on the wall, a symmetrical and asymmetrical design of one man, I don't like calling themselves, but, like an executive classroom of a one-man, bunk, and, the stainless, high silver, thing about the governmental structure of like the old governmental computer mainframe called the Whopper, okay? The thing is that that shelf on the wall, I mean, it's like I walk in there, it's like, what is that? But it ultimately got to, the exact opposite, and the telepathic blueprint on the wall, using the alignment of the vertical triangle on either side up under the shelf. Yet, automatically it's like the delta force, and the big smooth of the river identifies a delta as a triangle, and the power square factor of like the Israeli flag and the Deep Star 6, and the plateau at the same time, and directly at the opposite it starts out like the absolute values. Well, anyway, it's like we're on that wall, doing my thing about it. And ultimately it got to like a head east thing about the Arctic Circle, closer to the toilet side as a head east view, and the 5th dimension thing about up in the air in a beautiful balloon, up in the air, my beautiful balloon. Well, ultimately it gets to like, Orion performance monitoring, and the hot air balloons on that particular book of Orion performance monitoring, and the idea that the condensation and the evaporation, based upon the altitude and temperature, the demanded requirements of a rainbow. And the thing with this is being measured in like the density being measured in nanolumens, is what the deal is. About the impedance and amperage of the 13-band graphic equalizer being the pastels of night vision. And ultimately, the thing about the baptism is seen to be, the Flag Day thing about June 14, 1992 on a Saturday morning being, Flag Day and Six Flags. Ultimately, the thing about, Astroworld. The thing about Six Flags is in also like Dallas, the area code of 214. Okay, yet San Antonio, Six Flags, Houston moved to, Six Flags was already in Dallas, okay, and then Astroworld turned to Six Flags, and then I think, I'm not sure if it was a 6-month period. I'm thinking it's almost like something, either 6 months or, maybe even 6 years. I will actually have to think about that. But it moved to like, San Antonio, and it's ultimately gotten to the thing about involving what seems to be, involving SSI and supplemental security as SUP, SEEK, TREAS, is TREAS 310. And it seemed to be, the deal about the Alamo, and the thing about, carbon footprint, and absentee voting in the way of like San Antonio being used as some idea of univision and Latin terminology below the equator defined as the history of the U.S. $1 below the equator in Latin America. And ultimately, it's obviously, now seems to be, the thing about Brown and Root and Valero. And similarities of, I-10 representative like binary numbers. Yeah, the thing about the alphanumerics of, 10 being like 1 and 0, and the word TEN, the numerical word 10 being like the alphanumerics of 39. And, like OPEC or, the thing about the OPEC and ERP being 39, or the thought of the IEE, of the International Electronic Engineering, and the big O thing about 24, with the O being 15 more, would be the alphanumerics of 39, and how White Earp and John Wayne, it's almost like the litigation de facto and writ habeas corpus. And I mean, if litigation is termed as corporate law, de facto, most people's impression of litigation is the thought of normally a result in settlement, not necessarily annuity, but corporate terminology is so very much, about annuity. Many people's perception of de facto might only be, an issue of television programming, being the idea that monetary and domestic participation as like a medical power of attorney using a fixture in real estate as a deed restriction is like a result of television programming, or the thought of litigation itself based upon participation of television programming. Just turning television on, it's almost like a breach of national security. Some people's thoughts might not even really know what a breach of national security is. If it's ultimately getting to some idea, not necessarily a question of civil issues that would only reflect maybe a civil war as compared to some idea of some written participating factor that would only be the idea of like a values, whether if going beyond categorization is the thought of monetary, yet domestic presents the idea of like domiciled. At the same time, domiciled head of household, as globalization presents as international financial management of globalization. It's ultimately, for real, like, the toilet of domiciled head of household, yet it really presents the word globalization as almost like the Oval Office and like some idea of like even the football, or anatomy that way, of like a relation, the word relation involving, compatibility that way. Yes, what it takes for like, an affirmative fallopian tube as compared to an umbilical cord. What that is in hardware, like switching and routing of hubbing as compared to software identified like a node. Thing about anatomy in a way like the thought of like hovering in space exploration normally identifies the thought of an astronaut in space exploration, almost the principle of like an affirmative fallopian tube and like an umbilical cord at the same time of hardware. Yet the node is almost like the immune system of what seems to be the factor of like software engineering, more so identifying a hotspot in performance monitoring. And software engineering identified as a node. Yet a hub, like once again, it presents switching and routing internally and dissipates what's considered traffic, a hotspot that is identified in software as a hotspot. The thing of it is that both of them use IP addresses of Internet Protocol. And the thing of it is that what's going through a node is not going to be rerouted. I mean, it's going to be an issue of traffic, and how much of it is going to produce the idea. What dissipates what would be like the thought of a traffic or heat, identifying a hotspot as heat and traffic, is dissipated in hubbing and switching and routing that way of hardware, of stacks and layers and tiers and all kinds about presentation and all that stuff about IP address and switching around as compared to like a node. The IP address what's going through a node is like not going to be rerouted internally. And it's going to be like a backed up traffic jam, sometimes identified as a hotspot and performance monitoring that way. But anyway, the thing with it is that I was getting to like the thing about the litigation de facto that way, and where's a habeas corpus, because it seemed to be the thing about the way it works on the 1040EZ form. I mean, it presents non-taxable income, and the color codes of the United States President of the United States is Air Force One. The same colors of like a 1040EZ, and the thing about that one box involving the IRA, it presents the color code of like a clear blue sky during the atmosphere. It represents non-taxable income, supplemental security. Yet it's non-taxable. They didn't have to even report like not one thing about it. It's like a direct source. Given the principal application, just knowing that non-taxable income is like, sometimes on 1040EZ form of employment. I mean, at a certain amount, it's taxable. And if it doesn't go beyond, it's like refundable. It almost represents the same principle, somewhere between the ERISA statute and the IRA and non-taxable income based upon a prepaid tax, and whether it's prepaid tax and totally completely refunded, or going beyond the thought of having a need for a 1040EZ. I mean, it's still a practical application that can be used on A and B, Schedule A and B, in different ways that way. But the thing with it is that the ERISA statute presents the idea that de facto presents the similarities of all that combined of like constitutional law, having the right to assemble, the freedom of speech, and the freedom of press, and the acronym ISA, and the ERISA statute as compared to the IRA, and that one word annuity seems to be the big deal about de facto. Litigation is normally a corporate term, and corporate terminology is normally more so of annuity, not necessarily a settlement. Litigation is completely not the thought normally in identifying, de facto. I mean, anyone doesn't know the difference if de facto is involved or has been or previously might not really realize, whether or not if just television programming is, the thought of litigation in a way of like a writ of habeas corpus producing the evidence, and just watching it seems to be the issue, whether participation is only the television or the thought of like an easement in real estate being used to define a meaning, whether if appreciation or depreciation is the only thought of the fact of de facto being identified, whether it's going to be, the thought of a writ of habeas corpus or actual participation, or, thought of like auditing legal media as live, not necessarily deposition, which is after the fact, not really an issue of like the potential of like post-production or editing. So like auditing sometimes is really sometimes the issue. But anyway, yeah, so like, I mean, the thing about, I had mentioned, I was wanting to get on the Secrets of the Temple Okay, I'm kind of like really going in a different direction, but I was wanting to mention something about, the thing about the Galleria area and, current resident and the thing, and I'm going to go ahead and do it one more time again because, um, the thing of this is that LASIK corrective eye surgery. This is a picture on the west side of Houston, okay, at a specific location that I was actually taken back to, okay, not far from the Marathon Oil, okay, and the Artist City of Houston off of Yorktown and San Felipe. And the thing with this is that that particular location, before I knew that area anyway because, being in that area, just drive around, normally, to go, either shop at the Galleria or maybe go eat somewhere in that area. I already knew that building was there. I'd actually went there before I even knew LASIK laser corrective eye surgery was even there. I actually went there on a classified ad to actually potentially consider a placement of employment. But I never went to, I went there and walked around and decided not to go. And I left, okay. The thing with this is that that particular location, I didn't even realize that this person and the coupon seemed to be, thing about, the syllable, coupon being like God's angel, or the thing about a current resident being some idea of like an international electronic engineering factor of like programming, or what a current resident is in the way of like performance monitoring. The thing with this is that it's getting to the point that whether or not if a current resident is the idea, what's really going on in the mailbox is just the thought of like not realizing something about Mercedes-Benz, okay? And the thing of it is that it seems to be involving and not involving at the same time. Chase Manhattan and the band Rush and the camera eyes, what the real thing is about a picture is a picture. And even, like the Roosevelt New Deal Act, and the New Deal Act being like 88 in California, or the biggest mouth of the river identified as a delta. And the thing about the Delta Force and Oldsmobile Delta 88 and in California and all this information is kind of like going on. And well, the thing with this is that I didn't realize at the time, back in like 1979, okay, and I'm going to repeat it one more time real quick, and I'm trying to get back to the thought of like the Galleria area. And the thing seemed to be the thing about the book Six of the Temple, with the biggest diamonds being a European-owned German thing about mining raw diamonds, and Chevrolet Prism presenting, the idea of even, the thought of like the Dark Side of the Moon of Pink Floyd, an Apple, a compact disc was at the time an album and a cassette. Pink Floyd, the Dark Side of the Moon presents the Prism, yet it's like dark, okay. And Dark Side of the Moon and the Wall, like Michael Jackson, okay, the Wall, Off the Wall. And I was thinking about Jermaine Jackson, about him on news and specific factors involving television, and some idea of him at the Galleria and actually being there. And I'd heard something about that. Anyway, I went out there because of the ice skating and being in that area quite a bit back then, because there was like on Richmond, there's like what was City Streets, and I think it was called NXS, and then like City Streets is a predominant club right there, and not far from like Rick Cabaret and like R&R and Sage, like right next to, real close to the Galleria out in that. I used to be out all the time, in that area. But plus, the Art Institute of Houston is like right there, not far off of Westheimer, Yorktown, in between San Felipe and Westheimer. And think about 3D International on the corner of like Westheimer and West Loop 610, and think about Chase and Capital One, pretty much like side by side, right off of Westheimer. But anyway, yeah. So like all that information is like going on in my mind about memory minus tobacco, and the thing about it seemed that Germany and Germain seem to be the deal, like Egypt and Harris, and the pastel being 73 and the Israeli thing, and the Action Jackson. The thing with this is the class action and the Action Jackson thing. It seemed to be the thing about litigation. Most people's perception of litigation is some idea of sometimes class action, not necessarily de facto. Some people's thought of class action doesn't even realize, whether if de facto is or is not litigation as annuity, as corporate term, as class action. Normally having a right to assemble with the freedom of press and freedom of speech as class action. I mean, the thought of beyond constitutional law or a color code of earning state statutes annotated, or maybe even color coded the warehouse district of the one word, repudiation of the warehouse district of earnings, state statutes annotated. Although jurisprudence presents the pastel green similarities of the colors of Sprite itself. You've heard it before, like the Sprite, and the thing it is that British Petroleum and Sprite presents, the two different pastels of green, and presents, jurisprudence, the book in the law library of that color. I mean, if not the exact, pastel of that green, of jurisprudence with a black back. And think about that, the one word of warehouse districting presents the word repudiation as compared to the thought of a jurisprudence in combine with repudiation, meaning almost the similarities, or what that is, on par, or what the deal is about, the bogey and the boogie, the boogie and the bogey, and the big other thing about, the buggy, on par, stuff about, terminology and aeronautics and, pilots of, accuracy, the affirmative action thing as compared to class action. My thought of, Jermaine Jackson seemed to be the deal about the Galleria and, the Arctic Circle and the way of, like, the ice skating rink, and the figure eight and the thing about infinity representing, the idea of, my thought of the book Secrets of the Temple Half the Reserve Runs the Country, involving, the European German owned. And, Michael Jackson Off the Wall, it presents, the thing what looks to be like, Mobile One, presenting the graphite of like oil and oil that way, yet of toner, yet the birth certificate of a footprint, that way of and going beyond, thought of a copy and process with like Mobile One, the graphite and toner beyond a copy and process and biometrics, going beyond, the fingerprint and biometrics and into the invisible, a bunch of white stuff of invisible programming of LightScribe, and the laser, the thing about LASIK, laser corrective eye surgery, okay, and I've said it once, I'll say it again, and a very, very, very awesome place there is, indeed. The thing is that the location out on the west side, it seemed to be like a lot of information, and at the time, and ultimately getting to the prefix of the White House, 4, 5, and 6, and a point of origin if a picture is a picture, once again, real quick. And it seemed to be, the deal about the song, Rush, Payments Maintained with Intense Energy, and New York television programming involving, SVU, as compared to the SUVs. The deal about, the Zodiac, and the Chinese calendar, presenting, the difference between, like a calendar year and a fiscal annual in that way. I didn't even realize at the time, but the thing, Mercedes-Benz on FM 518 Broadway, I mean, as obviously, and I didn't even, have any connectivity of like the song Payments Maintained with Intense Energy or Chase Manhattan, but, like Mercedes-Benz like in front of me, behind me, beside me, in oncoming traffic. I mean, it's like unreal Mercedes. I mean, how could I not notice it? I mean, but I, at the time, didn't even have any connectivity to this particular coupon. I mean, it might be the deal about, the thought of like, picture's a picture, and the name is a name. And the thing is that, so like that's like really awesome for real. And the thing is that it presents the idea of like Mercedes and Chase Manhattan, based upon, and like even, here's the thing is that Elizabeth Hurley of Austin Powers movies, as well as, thought of like her name involving Elizabeth and like the Queen and Queen's Rag and Hurley. Okay, the thing is that Trump says, "Make America Great Again," and she seems to be the one of the camera eye in the movie Passenger 57. And I'm not sure if that was actually filmed, way back in 1965. I mean, for real, okay? I'm not real sure about, the thing about manufactured human genetic cloning of evolution of identical identity. I mean, it seemed to be, but the thing about the Archies and McDonald's golden arches, and that one particular person in the movie, Passenger 57, it seems to present a voice that has that, the British accent, and the stewardess in there, and what seems to be, not really a flight simulator, but like a quarter of a 75% like wide open, with the seats on one side of, with the luggage above. Yeah, she's in there with the camera, the video camcorder. Let me rephrase it like that. And she seems to be likewise the Elizabeth Hurley thing of Austin Powers. And Austin Powers Bluebonnet Imperial Eagle. And the thing about using the phrase her, it's almost like it's like the coupon. Okay, I didn't realize that Mercedes-Benz had been all around me like the 3 times of what was seemingly the picture's a picture, and the thought of State of Union dress is like a picture on a Padre in Little League as a senior. And an injury I didn't even know even involved a laser. I mean, in any case, years later, from 1979 to when I actually first really started, getting on YouTube.com with my drum set on my channel, Wade ASV Pretty, PRIDDY, I had no real idea of connectivity. You had an experience that seemed to be the difference between New York television programming of SVU and the SUV, okay? The thing with it is that certain factors going, through the circuit had been like seriously some real intense stuff like that. And the thing about the incoherence or the air raid, Data Foundry actually uses the acronym RAID. I'll actually have to, that is the one thing about Data Foundry and networking I'd realized, way after the fact. Data Foundry presented information involving networking, involving co-location. Okay. Normally, at the time, it was presenting information of SAN software, of international financial management, of international banking systems as SAN software. Not that RAID distinguishes anything about, an air raid in networking or performance monitoring. And it very well may be the thing about EA Sports involving, YouTube. Not real clear on that. But anyway, the coupon that I just showed you, it's like LASIK, laser corrective eye surgery. And the thing that the Mercedes, it ultimately could have been a point of origin of 1979, only because of the year 2022 and getting burned with a laser. That seemed to be the TB test, the shape on my leg of an virtually invisible, and only feeling the impression that gave the impression of like a TB test going through the 12 public grades, normally of tuberculosis. But the thing about lap bands around bronchial, or expanding or contracting around bronchial, as compared to what is defined as like intestine controlling some idea of weight, had been the one and only time I was actually on YouTube presenting. I probably wouldn't have talked about like really none of this, and continued, with my idea of standards as a drummer that I chose for myself, which is, beyond 3,000 individual songs with probably more than, pretty close to 300 different bands, compact disc, and some with the same artists and bands and singers, but, well beyond, 3,000 individual songs. But the thing of it is that all this is going on, and I'm not even realizing that this coupon, ever since like 1979, there was like a point of origin in 83. That seemed to be the first deal of the prefix 4 years later from 1979. And a picture's a picture, like this coupon I'm looking at. I've really kind of, kept it ever since, and, really to this day. And even more so realizing something about the current resident, okay, is what the deal is, and Mercedes-Benz. And it was only because of the second time, from like 1979, realizing that a point of origin actually generated the first numerical value of the prefix of the White House 4, and then 5 years later, and then 6 years later, a total of 15 years. And the thing, like a picture, normally is the thing about the face, and 15 in a numerical value that way, or the big O thing, about, something about a picture's a picture. Even Nolan Ryan, the California Angels and the Blue Angels, and the jet formation of the Blue Angels, of a 4-jet and a 5-jet and a 6-jet formation, which is actually the prefix of the White House of the Blue Angels. The thing about 1040 easy and supplemental security. Yet, Nolan Ryan on the Nolan Ryan Expressway of the California Angels and the Texas Rangers, and ultimately, to the Houston Astros, and presenting the issue of the grayscale, which is predominantly, and I'm almost for certain that the Houston Astros uniform during, like Nolan Ryan presented, the 10 shades of grayscale with the orange, like on the front lines of the beach run of the Coast Guard, and then the 5 using 5, and then 6, and it's like 56 is 10, and paper made that way alphanumerically and numerically combined, 56 is 10. And the thing about Roe v. Wade of annotated adoption and abortion, what annotated is to the United States Codes annotated, now from Section 94 and Roe v. Wade, or like state statutes annotated. I mean, the word in the law library is annotated in the Section 94, not normally even thought of as legal medium deposition, or the thought of a writ of habeas corpus producing the evidence, or how it's used, whether if real estate is only the issue of a neighborhood, identifying monetary and domestic, not necessarily gross national product. And it seemed to be the thing about gross national product that identifies the commercial venue of living quarters, normally involving a stationary engineer. Depreciation is normally, I haven't really ever heard of it, yet a commercial venue with like living quarters is, a living quarter, and actually live, in the, I call it a venue more so than a building, because the building seemed to be the deal about labor, yet building seemed to be almost, not participating in a circuit and involving maybe more so of neighborhood, not necessarily even, a 9-hole golf course, but, likewise in addition, still not the 18-hole golf course, yet it presents the issue of monetary and domestic that way. The 9-hole golf courses really do present quite a bit in that way, even monetary and domestic, of like whether or not if a neighborhood is appreciation or depreciation based upon television programming or some medical power of attorney using, a fixture in real estate, determining whether or not if a deed restriction is only the issue of performance monitoring as a foreknowledge, or the who knows anyway form of a writ of habeas corpus. And it seems to be really the issue that's really, and experiences like really, like international banking systems, as a carbon footprint and absentee voting, going through, the deal like a real not funny about we international, an international banking system. I mean, identifying monetary domestic gross national product as aggregates going through the circuit normally isn't the conversation. I mean, anything other than that, for me, is not going to be anything other than what you're hearing me talking about, like on YouTube.com at Wade ASV PRDDY at YouTube.com. The thing with it is that all that, monetary and domestic only presents the idea of whether or not of globalization and international financial management defines the meaning of a domiciled head of household, beyond the tidy bill man, after a long day walking, on international floating accounts of interest-bearing accountability, and, parting the Red Sea, and Jose, can you see by the dawn's early light? Well, yeah, so it's kind of like the halo schematic, thing about being on a toilet, hey, there's like an angel, there's like a haloed venue on the toilet, and there's an angel sitting on the toilet, okay? It's like a haloed domicile head of household, yeah. Sure it is, yeah. So, like, anyway, globalization in that way of, like, sanitation, think about even the oasis of love that way. The thing with it is that, as far as sanitation and the thing about even with Commonwealth, is it ultimately gets to the outhouse involving what would normally be identified somehow in governmental structure of the oldest governmental computer mainframe would ultimately get to sanitation, not necessarily the outhouse. Yet Commonwealth is the word that can track through history, identifying the outhouse. It would, go to the stainless toilet of governmental structure, and the white, normally porcelain, the word globalization that can be tracked. Normally, when in finance, it's not easy all the time. Normally, Commonwealth is the word that leads to the outhouse, and really sanitation in a more modern way, of like the oldest governmental computer mainframe called the Whopper, as compared to the thought of Toucan Sam, and some ultimately, to the Israeli bird, representative like, Fruit Loops and the color codes of like Toucan Sam and the blue and purple bird and absolute Christianity thing about, the Israeli flag. And the blue and purple bird is one bird called a whoopa, and English grammatical composition of the P being, pronounced and silent, or the whopper being the whoopa. And the thing about, the hoa and Washington Post, like, legal media and deposition that way of Washington Post, Washington being 130 in television, normally of legal media, and the Post normally being the thought of like deposition. And, after the fact of what de facto is or is not, and like writs of habeas corpus, producing, the evidence as compared to auditing. I mean, if it's ultimately constitutional law being enforced, whether it's television programming or the accusation of participation based upon a perception as a fixture in real estate being used, and what the carbon footprint is or is not based upon, some idea of like a legal media as some idea of like a, MP4 format, or some suggestion of like MP3 in the way of like a perception of like, what operators is or is not through the equator, or a carbon footprint that way. And it seems to be the supplemental security income presenting, San Antonio with SEC Treas 310, the supplemental security income as the Treasury 310. I mean, it's like San Antonio and Alamo, once again. And it presents all that information, ultimately linked to, like, Univision and the history of the U.S. $1 and the secrets to how the Federal Reserve runs the country below the equator of Latin America, and terminology, ultimately, of the being venue, and, like, it seemed to be the thing about Univision, and the being venue of human civil rights, defining the meaning of, like, being itemized, going through, like, a circuit as human capital, and what writs of habeas corpus all of a sudden is, as itemization, not necessarily the category, as human capital, not necessarily some archive division of dormant, participating factors that defectors seeking amnesty and don't even know, where it's at, and going through what might not be, an automatic perception of like aggregates having the right to assemble, beyond the thought of, criminology. Doesn't have to be criminology at all. I mean, in any kind of way. Yet at the same time, who would even think that a breach of national security is just not knowing the difference what an acronym is or is not, defining the meaning of what participation or not participation of an acronym in circuit is or is not. Normally the thing about, corporate terminology is litigation and de facto. Whether de facto is really going to be the issue of annuity as compared to settlement of corporate terminology, knowing the difference whether or not the reason why a nonprofit organization is not the Fifth Amendment, involving, the thought of like de facto is obviously television programming, and what participation is or is not, whether it's appreciation or depreciation, normally only of neighborhoods, not always a degreed issue, yet sometimes the thought of non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization, which is like normally identified a lot in real estate. Non-negotiable, non-transferable is like so used quite a bit. Sometimes even with FHA and HUD, normally involving real estate, normally termed as what loan officers actually present, that normally does or does not involve like a refund as a processing fee of like insurance based upon eliminating potential effect of default, and not being used as like entitled to some reimbursement that was like going on for a while, given the principle of practical application of like cash flow of non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization of non-negotiable, non-transferable as cash flow, yet the principle of like the FHA and HUD reimbursement of insurance paid on a premium in the event of default protected, if not used, as the right of actually reimbursement on that type of like participating factor. What was normally identified as available as a finder's fee, and that like made it a known fact. Hey, like you paid all that and never even used a claim on it, and are entitled to a refund. Normally it was identified as FHA HUD reimbursement. The the same principle of like, cash flow and non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization. Not always itemization, not normally identified, but the cash flow thing about non-negotiable, non-transferable. That way of like that fact of anyway. Ultimately, sometimes the thing about mortgages that would represent a whole new thing about it. But anyway, I'm going off into a different direction. I'm already going on more than an hour right now. And the thing with this is that I was going to mention Jermaine Jackson and Michael Jackson about, the book Secrets of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country. And the De Beers diamond is representing like Shirley geoprism. And geoprism is geoprism. The M is in, and the way geoprism is spelled with a Z, not a S, and geoprism with a Z, not a S. And it presents the alphanumerics of 109 is 110. And the alphanumerics of 247, ultimately getting to the deal about the United States Secretary of Treasury Robert E. Rubin. And the book Secrets of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country. And Paul Volcker, the name in the book during the Ronald Reagan, yes, the laser, and the deal of like Ronald Reagan presenting the ray gun, and some idea of like Ronald Reagan calling Paul Volcker identified as the name in the book. I have a hard time, whether I know or not, whether it is or is not, it's the question in my mind. If it's only the initials of Paul Volcker being PV, and what a House Speaker is to a PA, a presidential announcement. Bill Clinton, likewise said that he is so appalled. And, the thing with this is that Paul Volcker, being a president of the, New York Federal Reserve Bank, that name being used that way, and the initial being some idea of a PV, cabinet speaker. Yeah, or, the thought of like a plenipotentiary, using the thought of, the Delta Force in the way of a persuasive technique of thinking. And the PA system being, like a public announcement, a presidential announcement. And what a PA, system is to, PV is a House Speaker, a House of Representatives. In that way, yet the New York Federal Reserve Bank presents an issue of television programming. And I was going to get to the thought of, Mercedes-Benz being on around me in this particular person. And I'm almost for certain that, Elizabeth Hurley of Austin Powers, Bluebonnet, Imperial Eagle would be, my thought of maybe, through like years of like realizing something about, maybe I know the name and don't even realize it, and would say her. And the thing about Austin Powers and Passenger 57 and Elizabeth Hurley, and the thing about, my thought about, because this particular picture of her, the thing with this is that it seemed to be the information it presents, Trump saying, "Make America Great Again." And the thing about Great Britain and, the Hill HX-50 helicopter, and the same flag, the same colors of Great Britain and like America is red, white, and blue, is the thing about it. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm just now thinking about it for the first time, if it's the design of the flag is like a 22.5 degree of the what would be segregated as like 90-degree quadrants of 90 degree, and then the 45, and then the 22.5, and some idea of like the pi r squared factor, or the E equal mc squared, and what that is to like 56 is 10. Yeah, so like anyway, I'm going way off and getting broad and set of direction, concentration, direction. And it's almost like Trump saying, "Make America Great Again," and Austin Powers, Bluebonnet, Imperial Eagle, and the Passenger 57, and her in that particular would probably realize that I've been looking at the particular LASIK laser corrective eye surgery, and when I realized, that Mercedes-Benz was like almost like a Rush song, The Camera Eye, and payments made team with intense energy, and ultimately a picture, and the thing about the Padres and the address, state union address being the alphanumerics of 192, likewise the Transfiguration, and re-entering heaven from Mount Olives, and the thing about even the Oval Office, and even certain factors like anatomy and globalization representing a perpendicular spiral of quantum, beyond the thought of like attenuation, and beyond calculus of the different designed E, yet getting quantum, the difference between like legal media and deposition of like live auditing as compared to the potential of parameters at a 90, and some idea in my mind of like the star, 6-point star. A telepathic angel will have me presenting, you know, some idea of like, if the parameters being horizontal is some idea of like where you at, kind of like almost a principle of boycott and embargo, or the thought of like importing, exporting, and protected waters, providing thought of clearance, which is normally the issue of boycott and embargo anyway. It's the issue of clearance. Normally a tariff is like an automatic clearance, and what the deal is about a protected U.S. patent as compared to the thought of loss prevention. I mean, it's almost the difference between a patent pending of like loss prevention, or not being able to have intellectual property, of having fair use of an easement. I mean, even, you know, the thought of even a neighborhood, a single individual person over a method of banking called, not normally identified as de facto, as a writ of habeas corpus, or like a carbon footprint, or, you know, the thought of a absentee voting, of an endorsement of a checking account. Normally it's not even, you know, really even suggested as, you know, accessible conversation in a bank. I mean, you kidding me? In any case, so like yeah, so like it seemed to be the big deal about anyway, like I'm on 518, and I mean, like all 3 times, and during the same, whether it's a calendar or a zodiac, or like a Chinese calendar, of like the difference between a calendar year and a fiscal annual. The SUVs were like most definitely within that spectrum of like whether it's a calendar year or a zodiac or a Chinese calendar, normally involving like 1 year. Some idea of business and corporate law as a point of origin. The SUVs were like most definitely within that spectrum, as well as Mercedes-Benz for that 15-year period. You know, an experience that seemed to be, you know, involving, you know, an air raid, and an acronym of like Data Foundry. And I actually have to actually think about it and go back and actually in networking how RAID, the acronym in like Data Foundry, is really the thing about how it's really used in networking as compared to the thought of, you know, the thought of a TB test resulting in some idea of like television programming. You may have heard it before. Rate of Entebbe is like a miniseries. And then the similarities of Jimmy Carter during, in the book, 6 to 10 Five Foot Over in the Country, during the Jimmy Carter administration, what would be presented as Black Hawk Down as the movie, as a crisis, presenting the same as Osama bin Laden, in a different perspective, and whether if the Holy Land is the issue, or the thought of, you know, the TB test in high school, Entebbe, the rate of Entebbe as compared to the raid, the air raid, it experienced like, you know, I was going through a circuit, and like an air raid while I was asleep was like really, how many times, I'm not sure, but it seemed to be like a 9-month to a 6-month period. And, you know, what is taught in driver's education is the incoherence, with the cartoon representing the plus signs. It seemed to be the only way to really, anyone that was like in high school and took it and going through a circuit and remembered anything about that cartoon and the incoherence, and knowing that I was like so doing like alphanumeric equations, not even thinking anything other than sending an overabundant amount of like alphanumeric equations to like Washington, D.C. and various places around the United States. Not really thinking anything really negative or subtracted, and like a whole bunch is like really going on, and maybe me not realizing it's just me writing and experiencing something about myself, and not even realizing it for real, you know. The thing with this is that the cartoon presents the plus signs, and the incoherence is almost like it almost puts the cartoon into the thought of like the Archies. Make America Great Again is the thing about my thought of a voice in the cartoon, and I'm thinking it's in the late 60s to maybe the early 70s, and it sounds like the voice of Elizabeth Hurley, the flight attendant student with the video camcorder in the jet, and the accent of British. And I'm not real sure if it's going to be a British Columbia representing some idea of like Lexus LFSA, or Mercedes presenting the Smart for 2 smart car as compared to the Scion IQ, or the Zion thing about Grover Cleveland, 1,000 Years of Peace, and the U.S. $1,000 bill, as compared to all this information of Scion IQ being the IQ test highest possible score of 200, or the bicentennial quarter. Predominantly the thing about Richard Nixon and getting, even to the information, the secret system, how the Federal Reserve runs the country. But somewhere there's the TB test going through the 12 public grades of education and the mini-series on television. I think it's like in the early 70s. It may have even been the COVID-19 of 1972 of the miniseries Raid of Entebbe. Yet COVID-19, the thing about money being, the categorization of money being 72, or, Brown, what Brown is, and the thought of even Motown, and Town being like the Alpha 72. And what Motown is to Michael Jackson and Jermaine Jackson is the thing about what I'm thinking about, the 1951 copyright of the Universal Magic Encyclopedia, presenting that square root to the -3, and why one pronoun of the 4 types of pronouns cannot be used as a subject. I mean, RPM is like on Highway 288 in Iowa Colony, the alphanumeric's 132 in presidential. Okay, and the thing about Univision is likewise 132. It presents the 3 pastels in the black, like a Remo black dot drumhead, like a telepathic drummer in the Transfiguration re-entering heaven in the Book of Thessalonians, and a telepathic pentagon, a telepathic drummer, even the bicentennial thing about it, and the drummer in the Statue of Liberty. And, it puts Europe right into the region 2, and the Eurodollar, and the thing about going beyond, a method of banking of like identifying the symbol on the US $1 of like gross national product, of like, importing and exporting, more so on manufactured products more than the symbol itself on the US $1, representing, normally a method of banking of monitoring domestic as compared to gross national product, which gets into the commercial venue of living quarter, and of actually living in it and being involved with television, normally of advertisement. The thing with this is that the 240 votes presents, the pawn shop, the percentile of pawn shops, experiencing some idea like immigration, customs enforcement, not even knowing, what's else going on, It's ultimately some idea like the pawn shop had 240% of like what's normally involved with a pawn shop as compared to 240 votes of a commercial venue of living quarter, like a demanded standard normally involving a stationary engineer. And depreciation is not necessarily the word in commercial venue, only appreciation, yet not a question, or affected by television programming. I'm assuming more so of advertisement, gross national product, presenting the stationary engineer. That's like loss prevention. At the same time, not that at all. Yet it presents the patent pending as like loss prevention of domestic and monetary as neighborhoods, not necessarily the greeter, or even, anyone on a golf course even affected by, what it means to be whatever it is they do on golf courses, affecting some idea of like maybe anyone other than they themselves, and what that is, and whether or not if litigation and de facto is only, the thought of like a medical power of attorney using fixture in real estate, defining the meaning of a deed restriction, and what a deed restriction only means, whether if the who knows anyway form is involving television programming in the form of like legal media and deposition, and what de facto is not the litigation as compared to a writ of habeas corpus itself producing, the evidence. If it's constitutional law or television programming, it's still the issue of like, see, that's what I'm really about is getting, my thing about my own, commercial venue living quarter, with the 240 votes is identified as a European standard, yet it's English and the Eurodollar and pronunciation is still like the principle of like a HMO and the PPO, yet the misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi and the ISS and the SSI and International Superstar and Supplemental Security and the HTTP colon being the ratio thing about it. So I really kind of been introducing myself. I'm trying to maintain, there's a lot going on, okay? And I have, a huge amount that I have to talk about because I spent like very many years really studying alphanumeric linguistics, and virtually any available information was what I'm talking about like right now and not limited to. And you can see me on my YouTube.com channel at WadeASV Pretty PRDDY at YouTube.com. The thing is that living a life of like a mega multi-billionaire millionaire and thought of like not depreciation or experiencing, television programming based upon, the naivety of teenage, perception of not realizing what audit and legal media and deposition is whether de facto is the only idea of whether writ of habeas corpus has always been the thought of like knowing or not knowing, the who knows anyway form of like a writ of habeas corpus or a projected estimate option in future. It only seems to be involving neighborhoods only of like monetary and domestic, not gross national product. Living in a commercial venue of living quarter is almost like any building involving, including high rises, having a stationary engineer. Depreciation normally isn't really normally even heard of. It's only seemed to be the deal about residential, whether it's degreed or non-degreed. A neighborhood is still like a neighborhood. Anyway. It's not that urban and suburban define the meaning of third world, or even knowing whether or not if having fair use of intellectual property is only the thought of third person as some idea of like monetary and domestic, not making a grade beyond local area networks of internet protocol of like local area networks, and what wide area network is of maritime law, or the American Idol beyond a local area network is some idea of the American Idol going beyond maritime law, of the thing of taxiing on a runway of aviation and aeronautics that way, and getting beyond some idea of liquid equity, knowing whether it being on or offshore is more so the reality of not a contesting factor of immigration's custom enforcement and a vice president network, or just being used as an easement as some idea like legal tender for all debt, both public and private, or some idea of the note being like 54 and Vantage Love being like de facto being 54, or Vantage Love 30 being secret de facto Vantage Love and secret de facto, and Vantage Love 30 and 30 being 100, and now seems to be the deal about like San Antonio being the deal of being used as like the Alamo, some like litigation de facto and res habeas corpus. And somewhere between, like John Wayne and Wyatt Earp, using San Antonio, some idea of whether or not if appreciation or depreciation is a result of combined what would represent maybe the recent statute and the IRA. It's like an Apple iPhone SE between the recent statute and the IRA on 1040, yet color codes separate and individual. Yet the thing with this is that San Antonio providing some idea of like de facto is litigation, or some idea of like settlement and annuity, and some idea in addition escrow of like real estate, not necessarily the corporate term of venture and merger is normally identifying two factors of ventures and mergers. If it's the issue between litigation and annuity, defining the meaning of like writs of habeas corpus as de facto, whether it's annuity or settlement, it seems to be the deal about corporate ventures and mergers, more so, representing, the idea of like commercial venue of living quarter, more so of importing and exporting, more so of gross national product, likewise, in addition, a different perspective of a power, more so probably, more so than the principle of like commercial venue of living quarters, of having stationary engineers. But that's the thing I'm looking, involving, like audio production, like a 5 floor with like a basement being a total of 6 floors, with a basement and everything about it, and the thing about, Visions Tower, yeah, Visions Tower high rise, and, Star is Born, and the telepathic star is like airborne, well, the thing with this is that, I might as well be an international superstar, yeah, so like, is it the lighting, yeah, so like, anyway, so like, there's a lot going on, and, really thinking about, I've heard the phrase, and maybe it's true at some point, but I'm sure that making a grade is, predominantly, included with, the thought of like, you've heard before, it's not what it's who well, I'm sure at some point it most definitely is what everyone knows and what having a right to assemble is. And, me introducing myself is some idea like the misappropriation allocation is some idea of like a international superstar and a supplemental security, and being a drummer and on YouTube, what I've chosen as a drummer. Likewise, virtually every song that I play and perform as a standard. As a music video portfolio on YouTube.com has presented issues like all the stuff going on, has presented what is normally like an automatic perfect, not the idea of like a breach of copyright, or defamation has presented, the issue of like whether or not if EA Sports has been presenting, a little bit more than, me making a mistake on anything on YouTube. It's normally, just not it. There's like other issues involved. I know my stuff for real. So like, I have like, that on YouTube, and there's like issues going on and with, the thing about it. And I don't want to dwell upon that. I'm not trying to find the negative side. And I'm sure that some of it may be, the whole thought that a star is born and a telepathic star is airborne, okay? And try not to, dwell upon a negative side of consideration in a way that realizing maybe that's not the way to approach it or, deal with it. And I'm trying to stay positive in an effective, progressive, positive way. And it's not always, exactly the easiest thing to do. In any case, so like I'm trying to, go on with it and present it in the best way possible. In a professional way and like not lose it. And try and get something accomplished other than, some idea of like another day. But in any case, the thing with this is that the sliding you see is like some of the newest that I just got. I was thinking about sending it back, but I'm thinking about it's working more so the way it should be, more so now than some. I'm going to actually think about it. It's already going like an hour and 21 minutes and like 39 seconds right now. But anyway, yeah, I just wanted to include that because I'm going to upload it from my gallery, off my mobile telephone to YouTube, which is the only way I do it. I normally don't use like YouTube camera on the website itself. YouTube actually provides like a camera with a click button icon on YouTube itself. I normally don't do that because YouTube is presenting the issue of what access means, and I don't know if it's. I've been trying to contact them because I'm not like really trying to just let other people introducing their stuff on my channel just because they know what my address is. WadeSVPrettyPRDDY at YouTube.com. It's kind of like I've been trying to contact them. Hey, what is it that I'm not doing that would protect the issue of like anyone else being able to upload anything to my YouTube.com channel, other than what I maybe type in with the site itself, other than what I'm doing on my own YouTube, presenting it. And I've been trying to get some like real clear answers because really since 2020 is really when I really got started. But it was only because a second experience of a laser on my left calf. It's the shape of a TB test, and knowing what it is that I'm actually talking about, the Lexus LFSA with a picture of it. I think it's like probably the coolest and most advanced of the 2015 Geneva Summit meeting. And the thing with this is that was the first time something about not necessarily the thought of a lap band, but bronchial of an expansion, and I mean that is for real, like actually being recorded, and for the first time, I kind of suspected something that like that had been affecting, my weight of lap bands. By remote, freaking control, because like I'd woke up and during going through the Stargate program and realized I'd been operated. I didn't even know I'd been operated on, going through a circuit, and that error rate had taken place. I knew that a 7 to a 9 month period had taken place. And I knew that, but I didn't even know that 4 inches of my humerus bone on both sides, I'm assuming is probably the VIX Formula 44, if not including the Acura being 44, or the DD somewhere in between, on the driver's license. Not that it's the idea of Department of Defense, but the thing with this is that with the acronym ISS, the Misappropriation and Allocation of Mississippi, okay? The thing about the spore stone and being used in orthopedics to repair missing or damaged like bones in orthopedic surgery, the spore stone, is it, and the best. Anyone seeing all that information on World News would like automatically know the first time. The word mending is like so used, not that it's identified as constitutional law and then mending factors, but at this point, I'm to the point realizing that a birth certificate and going beyond a black footprint into the lifestyle beyond biometrics in the footprint and the fingerprint and all the combination between pasty symbol being the thing now seemingly presents the pastels and even close encounters of the third kind, the plateau, and the atonement and the Ark of the Covenant of God. I mean, for real. And the thing with this is that all that had taken place between like 1994, 95, and 96, really, the end of 1993, December 1993, really ultimately even, including 1997, but the 3 years of 94, 95, and 96, my thought of the emergency 911 and 9/11, the World Trade Center, it started off, and based on the information, I'm assuming it's only because of Vice President Network. I mean, the incoherence is unreal. Something about the World Trade Center and certain factors of whether the information of the 2001 is only the difference of 6, and all the alphanumerics seem to be like between like ABC 13 and ABC 7. Los Angeles' difference of 6, or J.D. Powers being the difference of 6 between J and D, and Six Flags being, the thing about 6, and, between Theodore and Franklin Roosevelt, the 6 presidential terms in office, and now the next, of Trump, the 6 presidential terms in office and how it's calculated seem to be something involving, Mount Rushmore and the forefathers of the nation, because the alphanumerics of 6, it seems to be, it's not always calculated the same way, but based upon doing it so many times, becoming aware and recognizing that there's like 4 different methods of calculating what duration means in alphanumerics and involving the number 6 and a combine of alphanumeric and numeric. Seems to be the deal about the forefathers of the nation, because it seems to be only 4 different ways of calculating 6 and where it's applied that way. I've done it so many times I actually was realizing that was happening. I was recognizing that it got to 4 different methods of computation in alphanumerics that resulted in the alphanumerics of 6 that seemed to be the big deal at a presidential level. Maybe even think about, Univision and even Iowa Colony and Univision that way of a presidential thing about the alphanumerics of 6. But anyway, this is going on. It's already like an hour and 27 minutes and like 17 seconds right now. And I was going to kind of think about the Michael Jackson Off the Wall. Seemed to be the Mobile One graphite of the wind unit. And, Jermaine Jackson, something about the Galleria in that area. And, 3D International in my mind. And something about, the square root to the -3, why one pronoun, 4 types of pronouns cannot be used as subject. It's almost like the 33, 45, and 78 RPM of like a black vinyl of Motown. More so of Motown, the thing of Motown, Michael Jackson and, Jermaine Jackson. And the square root to the -3 is the 1951 copyright. I mean, why one pronoun, 4 types of pronouns cannot be used as a subject? It's almost like RPM on Highway 288 in Iowa Colony and ProBass just south of Beltway 8. And, the figure 8 being, horizontally on a zoom lens being infinity, the infinite lines of a 9-degree right angle and perfect 10-10 vision of astrology. And, my thought of the coupon of laser corrective eye surgery, I mean, it's awesome. Seriously awesome, yeah. So, yes, that's what I think about it in the theater about the band Rush and Mercedes-Benz, ultimately the 4th year, the 5th year, and the 6th year of Mercedes and the SUVs, different but seemingly New York programming involving SVU, Special Victims Unit, as compared to the SUVs, which seem to be the duration between a calendar and a fiscal annual, as compared to Zodiac and the Chinese calendar and the year of the dragon, my birthday, 1964, which is about a year. Similar to a calendar year and a fiscal annual, yet of the Zodiac and the Chinese calendar, presenting orientation that way of Japanese yen between the SID. It seemed to be Disney in a way, a PG-13, a PG of presidents and governors and parental guidance, a PG-13, and the 13 stars above an eagle, presenting some idea of the alphanumerics of 13 being 99 and telepathic. Even Chevy Chase, that the deal about, his thing about it, yeah. So I was kind of trying to keep that in mind, because it seems to be that Jermaine Jackson is presenting some information as Germany, yet color-coded, yet in Motown, Michael Jackson presenting, off the wall, it seemed to be the Mobile One of graphite being of the footprint of like a birth certificate, yet the graphite of toner going beyond the fingerprints and biometrics, of getting into the electronic side of LightScribe, not paper in any kind of way. It's the thing about Michael Jackson off the wall seemed to be the wind unit and, being barefooted and walking on graphite. Yeah, and think about, Jermaine Jackson, it's almost like the Secrets of the Temple and the German-owned, European German-owned deal about diamonds and the nanoluminance of, like, the diamond book. I mean, I'm realizing quite a bit about that book and the thing about if it's hopefully, getting to Motown and the 3 RPM deal about, Highway 288, the 33, 45, and the 78. I mean, automatically 33 is like my name, Wade. 45 is automatically like ASVAB, something about, I'm not how sure involved, if ASVAB's even involved with like a recruiting officer training center. But I'm thinking that, the ASVAB, like I scored like 97%. It's like something about the Army, and I don't think it's limited to the Army. I think it includes the Air Force because, the deal about AA, and American Amplified, the AA of the Air Force and the Army. The ASVAB test is the highest possible score. But I made like 97% on it. And I may have been going to be making 97% anyway, considering what I know now, like Rock Me Amadeus. And, the thing about yeah, Moby Dick, yeah, and Gregory Peck, and the thing about caviar and hors d'oeuvres, and some idea of black dot on the map as compared to the RPM 3378, 3345, and 78. 78 being like the alphanumerics of like Escrow and FBI Miracle and Heart God. The thing about the square root to the -3 in the 1951 copyright of the Universal Magic Encyclopedia is kind of like, all the information around it, it just doesn't quite compute to why it's even on the same page. And it's almost like the principle, going through the idea of like, all that, yeah. And the thing of it is that the RPM on Highway 288 and the ProBass, it presents ProBass and Bass Pro. It's like forward and reverse of whether or not the electronic schematic fish is a symbolic representation of input and output that way of like an affirmative fallopian tube or an umbilical cord. It's like the I/O of IBM, input output, the Eurodollar and the US dollar, and the misappropriation and allocation of the Mississippi. At the same time, it's like hubbing in nodes in software and hubbing in hardware. So it's like the input and output of an IP address, switching and routing. It's almost like the affirmative fallopian tube and umbilical cord. In anatomy, for real, in relation, is the word between architecture and platform and what the equator is. That way, the electronic schematic fish of embedded encryption and pronunciation. Also, its degree level of practical application of compatibility and its intended use by definition. A little bit more in depth than what I'm really talking about, other than pronunciation involving alphanumerics and linguistics. A practical application more so of principle than exponential quotients of powers of multiplication. The power is more of the principle side of pronunciation, not necessarily the intended use of definition, but in combination. Whenever. But anyway, I'm going to need to take a break. It's already going on. I've been going on. This is probably the longest video I've made. It's like right now. But anyway, yeah, I want to do that much about it. I'm going to take a break right there with that much about it, okay? There it is, okay.